Is buying a home in Raleigh risky? We are going to be talking about all the risks associated with home buying in our area in today's video, so stay tuned.
All right, so we're gonna break the video up in two parts. The first part is gonna be talking about the contractual aspects of buying a home, really in North Carolina. This first part is gonna be applicable no matter where you purchase a home in North Carolina. The second part of the video, we're gonna focus more on just Raleigh specific things, namely weather risks, because we get a lot of questions regarding weather in North Carolina, specifically things like hurricanes, so we're gonna address that.
And how deadly is the copperhead? People think we see them like every day and they're like living in our beds or something.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about that too.
Yeah. All right, so digging into the contractual aspects of buying a home in the Raleigh area or really just anywhere in North Carolina. The first thing is when you buy a home in North Carolina, it is as is. Every single home is as is. And that's important because you don't always find the house. It may not be marketed as is, but the contracts in North Carolina state that every home is as is.
Right. It's a very seller-friendly state.
It is.
So what we mean by that is, let's say you go under contract. In some states, you know, a seller might even have to do certain inspections prior to putting the home on the market, or once the home inspections are done, they might have a requirement to address repairs on that. That is not the case for either of those things here. A seller can list the home. The buyer is responsible for getting a home inspection if they want one. The buyer can propose repairs, but the seller has no legal obligation to fix anything, even if you think it's like a big problem. So there's no certain items that have to be addressed by sellers. Sometimes they will be, so we don't want to say a seller never makes repairs. There's just not a legal obligation in the contract to have to.
Exactly. So if you think like as is, kind of the sub point of that is exactly what Cindy just said. Sellers in North Carolina, they don't have to repair any issues that come with the house, and they also don't have to disclose anything on the documentation. There's an option on the forms to select no representation for all of the questions on the disclosure.
Yep, the state requires the sellers to fill out a property disclosure, and it has a whole series of questions like, is there anything wrong with this system? Is there anything wrong with this function? Yes, no, or there's a third option, no representation, which means, you know, plead the fifth, right? So you can take it as it is. That could be a big red flag to a home buyer in the process. Sometimes it's just a question where the seller really may not know the answer to that question. They just don't have the knowledge from when they bought the house, or they sometimes they just don't want you to stay, or maybe they inherited the home and they really don't know anything about it. So, you know, it has its purposes where it makes sense for no representation, but oftentimes if you see it and there's a lot of those marked, it could be a little like, feels like you're hiding information. A little sketchy.
All right, so we talked about how North Carolina is an as-is state. So to kind of pile on to that risk, so there is a deposit in North Carolina. It's unique to North Carolina. I've not talked to anyone from any other state that has anything similar to this. It's called the due diligence deposit. And the reason this is significant is there are no contingencies tied to due diligence. It is non-refundable from the moment you go under contract. Even if you were to back out 2 seconds after you sign the documentation,
it is still liable.
It is non-refundable. It's non-refundable based on inspections, financing, appraisals. There are no contingencies as a part of that deposit.
Right. And that also includes home inspection processes. So if you go under contract, you put your deposit down, and you had a home inspection and things come up that make you uncomfortable moving forward, and the seller decides they're not going to fix it, you have the chance to walk away from the contract at any point in time, but you're always going to forfeit that deposit unless the seller is in breach of some kind of legal issue where, you know, maybe they lied about something, or something's going on with the property that's not legal, and you have to prove it, you know? So, so there is this risk there. And due diligence is always negotiable. There's not a set amount. A lot of people think, oh, there must be like some kind of percentage that's common. It's really not. It really ebbs and flows with the market.
It does.
Right now we're in a pretty competitive and tight market, so that number has been like increasing a lot. So, you know, you have your offer price that's really can help make your offer stand out. But then that second item that people really care about on the sell side is the due diligence, because they know if you have a high due diligence, you're probably not going to back out of the deal. And it shows how serious you are about moving forward with the home. So, you know, you're not going to lose $10,000 over a $1,000 repair, right? So, you know, the seller, it kind of keeps you in a hold a little bit, which does feel really risky to lose that much money in a contract.
It does, yeah. And we do have the more common deposit as well called earnest money. You're probably more familiar with that if you're coming from another state. That is refundable up to a certain point in the contract, which is a date on the buy side that you can set. The challenge with earnest money is it's not used as much in a competitive market. And so it kind of falls to the wayside. Due diligence gets prioritized. If it's not a competitive market, that's when you see earnest money kind of start to enter back into the equation some.
For sure.
All right, so now that we've talked about the contractual aspects that are risky in North Carolina, really, again, that is applicable in every area in North Carolina, though the amount you're going to put in due diligence is going to vary per market, per area.
We're in a more competitive market.
Yeah, exactly. How competitive it is in different parts of North Carolina. So moving on to specific questions we get about other risks in North Carolina, specifically the Raleigh area around weather and wildlife.
So when people are relocating to the area and they see North Carolina on a map, you know, it looks like we're very coastal because we are on the East Coast. But Raleigh itself is very centrally located within the state, and we do not experience like hurricanes and things of that nature here the way that maybe if you lived like in Wilmington or on the actual beach in the Outer Banks or something like that.
To be fair, a hurricane could hit Raleigh.
Yes,
but it would be very.
It
would be like. I mean, that's almost a generational type of
right.
thing. You know, normally by the time a hurricane gets here, it's tropical storm, tropical depression. There is enough wind and rain even in those events, and we have enough trees that trees will fall. You
might lose power if they hit a power line.
But it's not going to be like a hurricane event
like ripping houses out of the ground and stuff like that for the most part.
Or large scale flooding events or anything like that.
Right. And then we don't really experience drought here in the way that, you know, if they say we're in a drought, it's nothing like the way it is, I feel like, more on the West Coast where people are really, really struggling, can't have water restrictions and things of that nature. That's not really the case here. You know, we have 4 seasons. Winter is chilly. I call it freezing, but you know, it's all relative, right? So in the summer, it's hot and humid, and then we have, you know, it's balanced. So it's kind of nice, good weather. All right. And lastly, we get a lot of questions about wildlife here, which is kind of funny because I don't really feel like we have crazy wildlife here. But you know, I think when people just Google around, like this concept that we're like covered with copperhead snakes is like really funny. It's like one of the few poisonous snakes in North Carolina. There are copperheads here. I'm not going to lie. You know, we see them occasionally.
2 last year?
Yeah, I saw 2 last year in the neighborhood. They're not like infiltrating your house or anything like that. It's going to be outside. They tend to they hide, you know, they're usually in the rocks. If you see them on the road, it's because they're like out sunbathing or something like that. They're not like going to chase you down or anything. When you get bit by a copperhead, it's usually because you like picked up a rock and it happened to be there and it probably bit your hand.
Or you stepped on it.
Or you stepped on it mowing the grass or something like that. So if you just take a few precautions, if you're in a really rocky, grassy, wooded area, maybe don't wear flip-flops, especially like at dusk. Then you're probably not going to be bit by a copperhead. We've lived here our whole lives. Neither of us, and none of our family members have ever been bit by a copperhead. I have a handful of friends.
We're going to get bitten this year.
Just because I said that. They're coming after me. They're going to be in the house when we get home. I have a couple of friends, I think, that have been bit at one point. No one has like died from a copperhead bite. You know, you go to the hospital, you get the antivenom. So I don't feel like that should be a reason not to move here. I don't know. I feel like when I think of Arizona, I just think of scorpions, you know, and I think that's what people think of North Carolina is like we're filled with copperheads and like all these crazy spiders and stuff. And it's really not like that. So I don't think most people are not going to have to worry about getting attacked by a copperhead.
Exactly. So when it comes to purchasing a home in North Carolina, the risks are mainly associated on the contractual side of just how
not the weather,
how
not the
buyer
wildlife.
or how seller friendly the state is, and the types of deposits, and you know what sellers can do as far as not having to get inspections, not having to essentially selecting no representation on things. And so that's really where the risk lies of purchasing a home in North Carolina. But
for sure,
I'm Zach. This is my beautiful wife, Cindy. We are a couple of real estate agents in the area. So if you are looking to buy or sell, we'd love to be your real estate resource lenders of choice. You can find our contact info below. You can also find us on Instagram.
Yep, we'd love to have you follow along. You can find us at the Honeycutt Realtors, and we also have a second page kind of talking about lifestyle in the area, restaurants, parks, developments. That's called the RDU Buzz. So we'd love to have you follow along there, and we will see you next week.
See you next time.